do you guys have any questions as far as any specific regulations you might want to add? You may have any specific questions.
This might sound silly. I haven't read enough, but do you need to get permission ahead of time to fly into certain airports?
No, let's put it that way. If it's privately owned, okay, and the way you can tell it's got the R on the, or it says private on the chart, then you need to call the owner and see if you can get permission. But if it's not privately, and some privately owned airports are open to the public, okay, and they won't have the PVT on there, even though they are privately owned. So yeah, if it's not privately owned, you can land anytime you want to.
Except for military.
And except for military, that would be correct.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Anybody? I think she left. Did she? Or only have,
well,
only
she keeps her phone keeps cutting out. She's signing back in. I see her signing back in.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so I'm gonna let her get in. Okay, there she's back in. All right. So what I'm gonna do is basically I'm gonna cover one FAR in part one. This is the question that's being it's not a hot topic, but every examiner asks that one question just to make sure that pilots understand it. And then from there, I'll move to part 91, which is the meat of the rules and regulations for flying. Okay. So if you have an FAR available, that's fine. If you don't, I'll just quote you. You can write it down. You can read it later if so you can see what I'm talking about. So let's talk about a private pilot, for example. Okay. And it's always that money, that can a private pilot charge money? Can they get money for flying? So if you read part 61.113, that's FAR 61.113, it gives you a laundry list of what pilots can do, okay? But the basic part I want to cover is, I want to go fly. Can I bring somebody along with me? And I use the word charge them or collect some money from them. All right, so about 3 examples. You want to go from here to, let's say, to Reading. You want to go from one airport to the other airport, and you don't want to pick up all the expenses. Well, if you want to bring a friend along and they want to come, you are allowed to collect what we call a pro rata share, and basically 50% of the total cost of the flight. And by that, they mean fuel, rental costs, or if there is a landing fee, anything that's associated with the flight. Basically 50% of that, the partner, your friend can go ahead and can share with you. If, let's say, for example, you want to go you want to visit another airport and you want to carry a friend, and that person is also a pilot. Well, with that, you guys can decide however you want to share it, because he's a pilot, and as long as he does some of the flying, if he does most of it, he pays most of it. If he does half of it, he can pay half of it. But between the two of you guys, as long as he's there as a pilot and he's logging the flight time, okay, you guys can decide who pays for what, okay, because you're both pilots. Then comes the final example is, well, a friend of yours calls you, let's say a friend of yours calls you and he wants to go to a different airport, and you're at home, okay, or you're at work and he wants to go. Can you fly him? And he's up, and he asks you obviously to pay the pro rata share. You pay 50%, he pays 50%. Even though he's willing to pay 50%, you cannot take him, okay? And the answer is, why is that? Well, I'll give you an example in a minute. There's something called a common destination. So let's say I want to go to Reading or to an airport, the second airport, and then your friend calls you and say, hey, I want to go to Reading also. Well, you have a common destination, okay? Even though if they were to put the idea in your head, they call you up and say, hey, I need to go to this airport on Thursday. Can you take me? Okay, and you said, I got business, I want to go there. I need to go there for a reason. For whatever reason is, you know what? You have a common destination, it's okay. But if there is no reason for you to go to that airport, then technically, legally, you can't make one up, and you cannot take your friend, even though he's willing to pay half and you're willing to pay the other half. Now, something that does come up sometimes, here you are, you're working for somebody, and that somebody wants you to go somewhere else to conduct business for them, okay? Let's say, for example, you are a restaurant manager, or you are a high-tech guy, you work in computers, and they've got an office somewhere else, and they want you to go there to do something for them, to work for the company you work for. So the important thing you want to remember is you are employed as a restaurant manager, or you are employed as a computer fixer, okay? That's your job title. Technically, your employer can reimburse you 100% of the cost of flying the airplane there and back, because it doesn't. Part of the FAR says that cost is incidental to your business, to your employee's business. So he can actually rent the airplane. You get in, you fly there, you fly back. He picks up the whole cost because you are not charging him for the airplane. And your job title, again, is restaurant manager or computer guru, and you got to go work there. Nothing wrong with that. Okay. You don't need to be a commercial pilot. Okay. Does that make sense? Any questions on that part?
So only if it's your employer.
Only if it's your employee. Exactly. And your job title is not pilot. Okay. That's the important part. If he was to say, you know what? I don't want you to be a restaurant manager anymore. I'm going to hire you as a pilot so you can fly me around, or I'm going to hire you as a pilot, and as a side job, you can be a restaurant manager, but I want you to hire as a pilot. Guess what? You cannot do it.
Okay. And what about if you're like an IC, like an independent contractor, or do you have to be on there?
You mean, okay, but you're working for him, correct?
Yeah.
If your job title is computer guru,
okay,
or restaurant manager, you can charge him. He can have him pay for the airplane and all the expenses. You're fine.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Okay, because you're not his pilot, and you're not hired as a pilot. You're hired as a computer guy to go fix something. So now it becomes your transportation cost. It's like, I'm going to charge you by the miles for my car. Okay. So, but again, it's incidental to your job. Okay. It's right in the FARs, part 61 and 113. Any questions? No. All right. So we're going to start with FAR part 91. Okay. Look, if you guys have 91.3, and let me get that first. Responsibility of the pilot in command. Okay. Basically, what it says is you have authority over anything that happens with that airplane. You are the final say so. So if you don't want Joe Blow to go fly with you, he doesn't have to go fly with you. If you have any emergency, you can deviate from any rule to conduct safe operation of that aircraft. So basically, you are the final say so in regards to the operation for the flight for that particular airplane. Any question? And it's very simple. The FAA says, if somebody was to try to interfere with you, like for example, you're on Southwest, you interfere with the flight attendant, he interfering with the flight attendant is also interfering with the captain. Therefore, you can go to jail for it, and you can get a big fine because you are interfering with the crew and you're not allowed to. All right. Any questions? Let's talk about 91.9. Okay. One of the things, what paperwork do you have to carry on board the airplane with you? Okay. We all use the term ARROW. Okay. A for airworthiness, R for registration. Those two must be on board the airplane. Okay. And it cannot be a facsimile, which means you cannot make a copy of it and carry it with you and keep the regular one in your safe so you don't lose it. Not allowed to do that. It has to be the original, something from the original from the FAA saying this is the registration or this is an airworthiness certificate. We have the second R, which stands for radio license, part of the arrow. Now, radio license is basically only required. It used to be required at all times. Now they changed it a long time ago. It's only required if you're going out of the country. So if you're flying into Canada or if you're flying into Mexico, you have to have the aircraft. The aircraft and you both have to have a radio license, called an FCC license, and you can buy them online. Just give them the N number, or your name, who you're buying it for. I think it costs about 10, 12, 15 bucks, and it's a one-time fee. Is good forever. Now, then you have part of the arrow is operating limitations, okay? And this can come in a variety of forms. Basically, for the newer airplanes, it's called a flight manual, okay? And it's by N number. It has the N number of the aircraft on the what we call a POH, okay, pilot operating handbook. But usually the flight manual is specific for that airplane. It will have the N number for that particular airplane, and that's basically, and you have to carry that with you. Older airplanes usually don't have that. Then what you have is operating limitations. Okay, like I saw there for a second. You have operating limitations, and those can be or placards. Okay, the placards are, like you say, you can see the N number of the airplane. It tells you must wear your seatbelt. It gives you the speeds. You find those anywhere on board on the dash of the airplane. And limitations: you can't exceed. VNE is this much. You can't go above this speed. VA is this speed. Those are placards. And no smoking, for example. Okay, door lock. It pushes, it tells you how to lock the door. Those are placards, and those have to be how can I say, on the airplane, and that's also meets the requirements of the rule. The last one is called the weight and balance. Older airplanes have a separate a sheet of paper that has a weight and balance, and it has to be current. It doesn't mean it gets done every year or every 2 years. Basically, a weight and balance is current as long as you have the actual correct empty weight of the airplane and whatever other associated numbers are required for that particular aircraft. For a Part 91 aircraft, I've seen weight and balance that are 15 years old. And why? Because nobody's ever touched the airplane. Besides the annual inspection, nobody has ever added any equipment or removed any equipment, and therefore, basically, it's still valid. If you were to change radios or change seats and you reupholster the seat, then maybe you would get a new weight and balance because the seats might be heavier or they may be lighter, okay? Or the instrument panel, because of the radios you add, might be lighter, it might be heavier. So the mechanic will do a new weight and balance, he'll certify it, he'll sign it, and that you have to carry with you. If you have a flight manual, usually that weight and balance record is in the flight manual towards the back, and that meets the requirement of the rule. All right, let's talk about 9113. That's the next one. Careless and reckless operation. That's like kind of a, it's a catch-all, okay? It's not, you don't have to break any specific rule to be 9113, but for example, let's say you are flying too low and you're doing what we call a buzz job, okay? That you're breaking altitude rule, but you're also breaking a careless and reckless operation, which means that, and usually what the catch-all is, if something had gone wrong, okay, what would have happened? So here you are, I use the word, you're doing a buzz job, you're flying over somebody's house really low, okay, and let's say the engine was to quit. Well, the area where you were, there are so many homes that if the engine had quit, you could only have crashed into somebody's house, okay? You're being careless, you're being reckless, okay? And therefore, they can add that to any violation that, the FAA can add that if they're trying to violate you. And usually, if you act in a careless or reckless manner, they take your license away for 1 year. They don't suspend it, they take it away for 1 year. 9115. Can you drop an object out of an airplane? And believe it or not, yes, you can. But if you read the rule, the regs, it says no pilots may unless you take extreme caution. So if you're being very careful and you want to throw something out of the airplane and you're being and saying, okay, I'm going to throw it out in an acre parcel where there's nobody around. Okay, for example, sometimes they used to have airports used to have airport day, and they have what they call a flower bombing contest. And basically you bring a bunch of small bags full of flour, and you overfly the runway and you drop it and see who can come closest to a target. You're dropping an object out of an airplane, but there's nobody around. You're being very careful, and therefore that's totally legal. If you drop somebody's, you drop something, a bag of flour over somebody's house, and you're trying to hit their house, well, you may hurt somebody by hitting. You may hit somebody. And that's not being very careful. And then also the FAA may say you're being careless or you're being reckless. You're trying to hurt somebody. So no, but you can drop an object out of an airplane if you're being very careful. 9117, alcohol and drugs. Okay. When I give it some of your flight tests or practical, I'll tell them, can you drink and fly? Right? Everybody said the answer is no. Okay. And so I use it as sometimes as a trick question to kind of, how can I say, make somebody smile? I say, well, I drink and fly all the time. Well, they know their eyes open up. What do you mean you drink and fly? Well, I drink water. I'm okay to drink water and go fly. So it's kind of a trick question. Okay. So, but as far as alcohol, that's totally different story. So there are 3 parts to drinking with the alcohol part. We all hear the 8 hours from bottle to throttle. Okay. So you can't drink within 8 hours of flying. That's the very first one. Okay. So no alcohol drinking if you're going to go fly less than 8 hours. Then you have the second one. You have the 0.04 alcohol blood content. So let's say you've been drinking, like you want to know binge drinking, and you haven't drank for 12 hours. Okay, well, you meet the 8 hours bottle throttle, but somebody goes to do a blood test on you and notice that your blood alcohol content is 0.006. Well, it's above the 004, and therefore, there you go. You're in trouble for that one also. Okay. Then the last one is you cannot be under the influence. So now let's go back to you want to binge drinking. You haven't drank for 24 hours. Your alcohol blood level is less than 0.04, but you can a police officer can actually really see that you're still under the influence. You still slur your speech. You're still hungover. You're still kind of you're not all there. So it's kind of a catch-all. It may not meet the 8 hours, it may not meet the 0.004 alcohol blood content, but because you are under the influence of the alcohol, they can get you for that also. Okay, and when it comes to alcohol, the FAA is very, very serious. I've had people get DUIs, and the FAA makes them go to an alcohol, makes them go see a psychiatrist for 12 months. Okay, and a report once a month to the FAA before they allow you to go back and fly, because you have to report if you're convicted, well, we'll go to that one, but if you're convicted of a DUI, you have to report to the FAA. And they just want to make sure that you are not, how can I say, alcohol dependent. All right. Any questions so far? Now, if you read the FARs as the ones I'm talking about, I'm just talking about the basic nitty-gritty of the of that particular FAR. Some of them are very long, okay, and self-explanatory, but what I'm explaining is I'm putting the whole FAR in just basically I'm just summarizing it. That's what you're really required to know. I'm giving you the highlights, the important points. All right. 9117. Nope, that was the alcohol one. Okay, let's go to 91. I'm going to do a big skip to 91-103. Does anybody have any questions at all in regards to specific questions for as far as FARs are concerned?
Not at this time. This is a good review, though. Thank you.
Oh, you're more than welcome. All right. 91103 calls talks is pre-flight action. You, as a pilot in command, before you go fly, it says you have to become familiar with all available information concerning that flight. Okay. And this is where people say, can you fly, for example, with a chart that's outdated, that's expired? Yes, you can. There's nothing illegal about flying with a chart that's outdated. Now, when you go for a practical test, the ACS says that you have to have current charts, and the examiner is going to want to see current charts. But if I want to go into cross country and my charts are expired, not a problem. There's nothing illegal about that. But there's a little caveat with that. Okay, now I'm going to go into it in a second. So going back to, you must make yourself, you have to become familiar with all available information about that flight. That means, are there any NOTAMs out? Are there any TFRs? How is the weather where I'm going? How is the weather when I'm en route? Okay. And let's go talk about the chart. Okay. I'm going from point A to point B. My chart is expired. And every information that I need on a current chart is also displayed on an expired chart, and nothing that affects my flight affects, that's displayed on the chart affects my flight. Legal to go. Okay, the chart's expired, so what? Let's take a different story. Now, I'm flying to an airport. They changed the frequency. They changed the airport went from a class Delta airport to a class Charlie airport. Okay. And I'm flying with an expired chart, and it doesn't show all the current stuff. And then I go through, for example, a class Delta is about 10 miles wide, the second shelf. So you think this airport is a class Delta, you get close, you enter a class Charlie, okay, without talking to anybody, and you have the wrong frequency, you figure out what the frequency is, you call in your land. Well, did the chart, if you had a current chart, could this have been avoided? The answer is yes. Okay. So therefore, that chart caused a problem. So now you didn't make yourself familiar with all available information about that flight. The FAA can go out, can violate you under 91103 for flying with an outdated chart and going through a class Charlie airspace without permission or whatever. Okay. So it depends what the problem is for that, what happened during your flight, that flight. So is it illegal to fly with expired chart? No, it's not, as long as it doesn't cause a problem. The most important thing is just make yourself familiar with all available information about that flight. Check out the weather, check out the airport, check out any NOTAMs, okay? Anything in between en route. And as long as you do your homework, it really is very simple. You've done your due diligence about the flight. It's hard to get violated for something like that. Let's go. 91107, use of safety belts and shoulder harness. All right. So I want to say, think of the airlines. If some of you have flown the airline, do you guys have do the passengers have shoulder harnesses? No. Okay. So if a shoulder harness is not provided, the passenger doesn't have to wear it. Now, that's for cruise flight. Let's talk about, there's three phases of flight. There's the takeoff, there's the en route, and there is the landing. So let's talk about the takeoff first, okay? Let's talk, you have pilot, you have passenger. If a shoulder harness and a seatbelt is provided for both the pilot and the passenger, okay, then you both, pilot and passenger, must wear it for takeoff. And the rule basically comes for the same as landing. So if a shoulder harness is provided, for example, take the Cessna 172, it's a 4-seater, okay? And there is a shoulder harness for the passengers in the back. Well, they're not pilots, just passengers. If there's a shoulder harness, yes, you must wear it for takeoff and for landing. During cruise, the pilot must always wear, let's go for the flight crew, must always wear his seatbelt, and he is allowed to take off the shoulder harness. So if you got a long flight, okay, you wear the shoulder harness for takeoff, and then once you start your cruise, you can take your shoulder harness off and do the remaining of the flight until you have to land. A passenger is allowed to take off shoulder harness and the seatbelt during cruise, okay? And then when it comes down for landing, the passenger has to go back and wear the seatbelt, and if the shoulder harness is provided, he has to wear the shoulder harness. So the pilot himself, you as a pilot, have to always wear your seatbelt, and you only wear your shoulder harness for taking off and landings. You're allowed to take it off. Now, little caveat. You have a shoulder harness, you're a pilot, and there's a shoulder harness. And I'm stressing this because as you get to bigger airplanes, it can happen. Let's say that that shoulder harness interferes with the way you fly the airplane, okay? Let's say you're a short person. You have to sit all the way forward, and the shoulder harness is not long enough, okay? It's forcing you to have the seat further back, and therefore you can't reach the pedals very well, and you can't reach the throttle very well, or you can't see the instruments. And like I said, I'm stretching it. But my whole point is, if that shoulder harness interferes with what you do as far as flying the airplane, you don't have to wear it for takeoff or landing. That's the important part. That's, and the rules, it's pretty long, okay? But that's the gist of it. A pilot must wear both, unless and the shoulder harness only if it doesn't interfere with his duties as a pilot. He has to wear both for takeoff and landing, and always wear a seatbelt during cruise. A passenger always has to wear a seatbelt for takeoff and landing, okay? And if it's and cruise, but he's allowed to take off during cruise. And then if there's a shoulder harness provided for takeoff and landings, he has to wear it. It's basically that whole paragraph on the shoulder seatbelt and shoulder harness. That's basically what it tells you. Any questions so far? Let's 91-111. Operating near another aircraft. Okay. And the FAR tells you is, let's see, you can't do it if it's going to create a hazard to another person. Well, that's obvious. You can't do that. But it also says that you can do it if you do by prior arrangement. Okay. So this is where we used people do formation flying. If there's two of you guys, you want to fly close to each other. Okay. You're allowed to take, depending on the airport, even control tower at airports will allow you to do it. You can take off formation flight, one right next to the other or one right behind the other. You can land right next to each other. You can fly in cruise right next to each other, okay? As long as prior to doing it, both pilots talk, they coordinate what they're going to do, and they agree with it, okay? And notice I said, prior to doing it, both pilots talk. People think you have to be underground to do that, okay? And no, you don't. Let's say you're out flying and you see your friend in front of you, you hear the end number. Oh, I know who that is. That's Joe. You get on a common frequency, you say, hey, Joe, where are you going? And, oh, I'm going to so-and-so airport. I'm going to have breakfast. Oh, wow. How about we do formation flying? Sure. So I'm going to come behind you on your left and let me know when you see me, and I'll come close and, I'll make sure that, I don't hit you. And are you okay with that? Joe says, yeah, I'm okay with that. Guess what you just did? You just, before doing the formation flight, you coordinated with Joe and Joe agreed with it. Totally legal. So it doesn't have to be underground before you take off. It can be anytime prior to doing the formation flying. All right.
Richard, do you need to notice ATC or anything like that? If so, they may say, okay.
What most people, let's say there's 3 of you, 4 of you, or just 2 of you, you have to decide. The best thing with ATC is, hey, we're a flight. One guy does the talking, and everybody else listens. Okay, so you call ATC, say, hey, I'm a flight of. This is November 1, 2, 3. We are a flight of 2. What you just told ATC, there's 2 of you flying close to formation flying, and you're the guy doing the talking. Okay, and you're a flight of 2, and that's the same thing with the control tower. If you go land at a control tower at the airport, a class Delta. Hey, Cessna 1, 2, 3, 4, we are a flight of 2 requesting permission to land. Okay. If he says flight of 2, November 1, 2, 3, 4, you're clear to land, you both are allowed to land right next to each other or take off right next to each other. But the idea is you want to tell ATC you're a flight of 2, a flight of 3, a flight of 4, whatever you want to do. One guy does the talking. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Yeah. Now I've seen ATC or tower says, no, negative flight of 2. I want you guys to land individually. Then the other guy has to come on, give me his N number, and you enter a normal traffic pattern. You do it individually. But as long as the one person calls it as a flight of 2, ATC agrees, you're fine. All right. Let's talk about right-of-way rules, 91-113. All right, so very first thing is, let's talk, think just something, make it simple. Which aircraft is the most maneuverable? That's number 1, okay? An aircraft, for example, let's take airplane, helicopter. They're both very maneuverable. They both fall on the same category, okay? And we'll talk about what that means as far as giving right-of-way rules. Let's talk about an airplane, okay, who can slow down, speed up, make left, right, okay, go wherever he wants to, and you have a glider, okay? Well, some people might say the glider is more maneuverable, but don't forget, the glider doesn't have an engine. Okay, he can't go anywhere he wants to. He has to stay within a certain area, depending where the airport is or how high he is. That way, he wants to be within gliding distance of an airport or a field. So really, the airplane is more maneuverable than the glider, and therefore the glider has the right of way. And they both can control up and down, slow down, and speed up. But once, like I said, the glider can't control how long he can stay afloat, where the airplane can, or helicopter, for example. Okay, so airplane, helicopter fall in the same category, and glider is the least maneuverable between the 2. Let's go to one more. Let's talk about a hot air balloon. Now, the hot air balloon really has almost no control. He can only go where the wind takes him up to a point. Yes, he can control up, he can control down. So who's more maneuverable, a glider or a hot air balloon? The hot air balloon is the least maneuverable. The glider is more maneuverable than the hot air balloon. So when the 2 of them get close to each other, the hot air balloon has the right of way. So airplane, glider, hot air balloon. Now we have a dirigible or an airship. Okay. One of those, like the Goodyear blimp. Well, they can go up and down, they can go left and right, they can slow down, okay, but they still very slow and at the mercy of the wind. So it's almost where, okay, now it's a kind of a 50-50. So now you have to go see, okay, so I'm not sure which is which. So let's look, what is the situation? Are we coming head on? Well, head on, it makes no difference who you are, okay? You're both going to go to the right. Now, if you're heading on with the hot air balloon, unfortunately, he just can't go right or left when he wants to. He's at the mercy of the wind. You still have to go. He gets the right of way. The airplane, glider, dirigible, balloon. The blimp will have to give right away to the hot air balloon. So again, think of the situation and who's the most maneuverable. I'm coming into land, okay? There's 2 of us. There's an airplane, there's a helicopter. Well, we're kind of on the same category. We're in the same how can I say, we're under the same, rules. So now where am I? Well, if the helicopter's in front of me and I'm behind him, well, of course, he's got the right of way. If he's above me and I'm below him and I'm in front of him, well, and I'm, closer, well, again, I'm below, I'm closer, I'm an airplane, I've got the right of way. Let's take a glider and let's take an airplane. Okay. The glider is above and the airplane is below. We're both coming into land and I'm closer than the glider. Glider almost cannot do a go around, can he? The airplane can. You give the glider the right of way. Two airplanes coming into land. And the rule is very specific. It tells you, for example, you got two airplanes coming into land. Who gives the right of way to who? Well, usually the one that's lower and closer is the one that gets the right of way. Now, it also says, because, let's say it's a Cessna 150, okay? And then you got a King Air. The King Air is further out and higher. It says, well, I'm faster. I'm going to sneak underneath them and get closer so that way I have the right of way. The rule is very specific. You can't take advantage of that situation to get the right of way. So the 150 is slower and closer and lower. He takes precedence. Any questions so far? So when it comes to that, is if you think, I'm going to use the word common sense, and who's the most, how can I say, who has the most, who's more maneuverable, the least maneuverable will always have the right of way. All right, 91-117, aircraft speeds. Well, there are two speeds you want to remember. Okay, 250 and 200. 250 knots. Nobody can go faster than 250 knots below 10,000 feet. Okay, that's what it comes down to. 10,000 feet, you're doing 250 knots, and that's it. They don't care how fast your airplane can go. And the reason why is a lot of small airplanes happen to fly below 10,000 feet, and therefore, you need, and the faster you are, the more maneuver, the more room you need to react. So therefore, they say, you know what? Let's just keep 250 knots, and that way it's slow enough so that it will give everybody a chance to see each other and avoid. So maximum 250 knots. When you are in an airport traffic pattern, class Delta, okay, you're limited to 200 knots. So therefore, you have to slow. So if you're a fast airplane, they expect you to slow down and get to 200 knots before you make it. Before you enter the class Delta airspace. Let's go for a little more class Bravo airspace. Okay. Inside the class Bravo, you're allowed to be at 250 knots. Under the shelf of the class Bravo, and we all know what the shelf is, I hope, where, like if you have an area that the class Bravo is between 8,000 and 10,000 feet. If I'm between 8 and 10, I can go 250, but if I'm below 8, it's 200 knots. I'm not allowed to go faster than 200 knots. So below the shelf of the class Bravo is 200. Inside the class Bravo is 250, okay? And class Delta airspace, 200. Below 10,000 feet, 250. Above 10,000 feet, it's basically Mach 1. It's almost the speed of sound. Or a mile an hour less than the speed of sound is the speed limit. And the reason why, there's another rule that says that, that you can't go above the speed of sound over land unless you have special permission. Military will get them sometimes. They'll go more faster than Mach 1 if they're doing something over the desert where there's nobody, because I don't know if you've ever been near an airplane that has gone Mach 1. There's a shock wave, and believe it or not, you can be very high, 15, 20,000 feet. The shock wave can go down enough and blow people's windows out and hurt, and cause damage to property. So the rule is below 10,000, above 10,000 feet is a Mach 1 is the maximum speed. And again, flying GA, we don't have to worry about that part. Any specific questions about aircraft speeds? All right. Then comes the 91-119 aircraft minimum safe altitude. All right. You're over. There's a catch-all. The very first one says, and it says anywhere you can't at an altitude if a power unit fails, an emergency landing without undue hazard to personal property. Okay, it's kind of a catch-all, and I have never seen that. How can I say paragraph, that phrase being applied to violating somebody for flying low. And the reason why I said, because if you go over the other on 91-119B, you're overflying a congested area. Okay, let's say you're flying over Sacramento, over New York, over LA. You have to maintain at least 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle that's directly below you. So it's not 1,000 feet AGL, it's the highest obstacle below you, and you have to maintain 2,000 feet horizontal distance from any building or any obstacles. So I tell people, think of New York City, Empire State Building. Okay, a person can fly at 1,000 feet. He's probably lower than the Empire State Building. If he flies 2,000 feet across, he's legal. Okay, but imagine if the engine was to quit. He had an engine problem. Guarantee you, he can't make a safe landing because it's all cities all around him. So I've never seen that on the one with no altitude being enforced, because he can say, hey, I'm over, I'm 1,500 feet above the ground. I'm legally, following the rules. So, and which is, he's 100% correct. We all do it, we overfly Sacramento. We're at 1,000. When we go from point A to point B, we fly to 1,000 feet. And if something was to go wrong, yeah, we probably might not be able to make a safe landing, but we are still legal to fly. So that's rule number one. Okay, that's got if you're over congested area, so you minimum 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle and 2,000 feet horizontal distance from the obstacle that's nearest to you. All right, let's take for example situation number 2. Okay, there's 2 parts to this. There's over a non-congested area, and there's what we call a sparsely populated area. Okay, so a non-congested area. Let's and it's, believe it or not, the FAA doesn't have a definition. Basically, I'll give you an example. Let's say you are flying between your point A to point B, and you have homes, okay, that are on 5-acre parcels. Well, that's not a congested area. Okay, that's other than congested. You actually can go 500 feet of AGL. Take out in the country, and you have 8 homes per acre parcels. Well, that becomes, even though it might not be congested, but you know what? It's, in between congested and semi-congested, you go up to 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle. So they don't have a definition. So basically, I tell people, if the homes are far and few in between, okay, they're far apart, it becomes a non-congested area. And then basically you can go out and go 500 feet above the highest obstacle, or 500 feet AGL. That's rule number 2. Then we have what we call sparsely populated area or open water. A sparsely populated area. Well, I'm flying, point A to point B. I don't see a house for miles. Okay, I don't see anybody for miles. Or I'm flying over the ocean. I'm flying over South Lake Tahoe, for example, open body of water. I don't see anybody. There's no boats on the lake. I can actually go as low as I want to. I can touch the water, or I can just buzz the ground 5 feet above the ground. But when I'm flying over a sparsely populated area or over open body of water, even though I can fly low, I still have to maintain 500 feet from the nearest person, property, building, or something. So in other words, it's sparsely populated area. I can fly very low level, but me as the pilot in command, I have to make sure that there isn't a car that I'm closer than 500 feet, or there's a house where I'm more than 500 feet. So if there's two homes and they're 5 miles apart, yep, I can buzz the ground as long as I'm 500 feet away from that house or any persons. Now, there's an exception to that rule, is except for the purpose of taking off or landing. So for example, as we know, you're at an airport and there's the homes all around the airport. Well, that rule says, you're coming to land, you can't stay at 1,000 feet above the ground until you're on top of the airport and come down. That's unreasonable. So except for the purpose of taking off or landing, then you have to comply with all those rules. If I'm landing, yes, I'm allowed to go as long as I'm doing a normal landing. If I come close to the house, well, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that because that's allowed. Any questions about safe altitudes? All right. Let's see. That's outside. Let me go for. (91-151). Fuel requirements. I'm going from point A to point B in VFO condition. Okay. I am required to carry enough fuel to go from point A to point B, and also 30 minutes for the reserve. Now, I'll give the example where can I do slow flight? Because I don't want to make an extra landing in between. So if I calculate the fuel as normal cruise to the airport and I can slow flight, I'm going to burn less gas, and therefore really I don't have to carry as much gas for my 30-minute reserve. Well, the FAR says a little different. It says that 30-minute reserve must be based on normal cruise speed. So which means that you can slow flight to your destination, and burn 4 gallons an hour. But if normal cruise speed is 8 gallons an hour, that 30 minutes must be based on 8 gallons an hour, not because the 4 gallons an hour for slow flying. Sometimes you're trying to build time rather than cruising at normal cruise speed, doing 120 knots. You say, I'm going to power back and slow down. It's going to take me an extra hour and a half to get to my destination, and therefore I can log more flight time. Oh, that's okay. And I'm only burning half the amount of gas I'm normally burning. That's okay too. But that 30-minute reserve has to be based on normal cruise speed. And same thing is for night flying. Your minimums are 45 minutes for your reserve. So the key word is normal cruise speed is what you have to base your reserve fuel on, not anything else. All right. 91-155. That's a lot of people get confused with that. And I noticed, when I give when I'm giving people a practical, and they get confused. Okay. So I'm just, this is an airspace question. We covered this in airspace. And it can be very complicated, but I'm going to cover it I'm trying just the very basics and see if you have any questions, let me know. All right. First of all, you have to think weather. Okay, weather minimums. You have to think of two things. You have to think of cloud clearance, and you have to think of visibility. Okay, those two go hand to hand. Let's take class Gulf, airport that's red, and it's in class Gulf airspace. What do I need for takeoff? 1 mile clear clouds. Okay, And class Gulf, we know can go up to 700 or to 1200. And some other parts of the country, it may go up to 14,500, just depending. But as long as you think of class Gulf, it's 1 mile clear clouds. That's all you need. The minute you get in class Echo, now we have the Cessna to 152, 3 mile visibility, 1,000 above, 500 below, and 2,000 horizontal from any cloud. Okay, so that's class Echo. Let's move on to a class E surface area. That's a class, it's a red airport, so a magenta airport with these little red dotted circles around it. And I'll use, for example, McClellan, where we are, is one of those. Red Bluff, which is further north of us, is a class E surface area. It's one of those. It's any red airport with a magenta dashed line around it. For me to take off from that airport, okay, what do I need? I need 3 mile visibility, 1,000-foot ceiling. Okay, people always tell me they need 3 mile visibility, 1,000 above, 500 feet below, 2,000 across. And that number only applies after you've taken off, not before you've taken off. Let me talk about class Delta airspace, the public control tower, okay? When we listen to the ATIS, okay, the ATIS says ceiling, okay, which is broken or overcast, okay? Scattered is not a ceiling. The ceiling is 1,000 foot broken. It's VFR condition. If it's 5 miles, 4 miles, 3 miles, you have VFR conditions. And, you know, that's what you're looking at when you want to take off. So from a class Delta airspace, a class E surface area airspace, in order for me to take off, I need a minimum of 3 miles and the ceiling must be 1,000 feet. Well, how do I comply with Cessna 152? You know, 1,000 above, 500 below, 2,000 across. Well, that's for the pilot to figure out after he takes off. One of the things he can do is he can take off and level off at 500 feet AGL. He's 500 feet below the clouds and fly into an area where the weather is better and then continue his climb. But the key word is, in order to take off, it's 1,000-foot ceiling minimum and 3 mile visibility. If you've seen, I asked question, if you see at the class Delta airspace and you go to the airport, it's 10 a.m. and the rotating beacon is on. What does that mean? It means that the airport does not meet one of those 2 requirements. The visibility is either less than 3 miles or the ceiling is less than 1,000 feet. I'll give you an example that happens quite a bit. And I'm sure if you've been around airports long enough, depending where you are, you've seen this, okay? You go to the airport and half the airport is clear as a bell, 20 mile visibility. And the other half, the ceiling is 900 broken or 1,000-foot overcast, okay? Well, the tower is going to say, hey, we're under IFR conditions. Even though you can see for 20 miles or 30 miles for this half of the airport, because half of the airport has less than 1,000-foot ceiling, you're under IFR conditions. So what can we do about that? Well, we can get a special VFR. People think special VFR is dangerous. Well, no, it's not. The rule for a special VFR is all you need is 1 mile clear clouds. Well, heck, I'm at the airport, I'm looking south, it's clear as a bell, and the north part of the airport is the one that has the overcast, even though we got 20 mile visibility. So I ask for a special VFR and I'm gonna go south. I'm not even gonna be near the clouds, okay? Because it's clear as a bell. So is it safe to get a special VFR? Yes, because I'm really taking off in an area where the weather is gorgeous. But because half the airport is covered, okay, the FAA, the rule says, if more than half of the airport is covered, has a ceiling less than 1,000 feet, you have IFR conditions. So if anybody's nearby, like the Bay Area, Palo Alto, San Carlos, San Jose, people get specials all the time just to get out because going the direction they're going, the weather is nice and clear. And if you got a student, you don't want to get an IFR flight plan or cancel your flight because the field is IFR. You can.
So, I've got a question. If you get a special out, can you get, what if you need to come back in?
You get a special VFR gun back in.
Back in?
Same thing. It's the
Special
same rule.
VFR.
Yeah, people, I've seen it. It's, if you're a student pilot, sometimes it might be nice. If the weather fits those conditions, if you've never done it before, get your instructor to go with you. Say, hey, show me how to get a special VFR. And every airport has a procedure that they use to give a person a special VFR and get familiar with it. You only have to do it one time to become familiar with it. Oh, that's what they're doing. And they're actually going to give you a clearance out of the airspace. And basically it may be like make a left turn, level off at 800 feet, go 4 miles on a heading of 270, and let me know when you're away from the class Delta. That's simple. Okay, I climb, I take off, I level off 700 feet, I make a left turn heading 270. When I'm outside the class Delta, I'm gone. It's that simple. It's not that hard. But, it's nice to do it once to, how can I say, to get familiar with it. And it'd be the same thing coming in for a special VFR coming in. The control may tell you, fly direct from where you are, fly directly to the runway, report the runway in sight. Okay. And okay, that's, you're clear to enter the class Delta airspace. It's very simple. And it's, if you're based at an airport, you do a lot of flying, it might be something you should get familiar with, just so that way you see what it's like. It's not hard. Now, if the visibility is actually all around the airport, 2 miles, and the ceiling is low, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't go. Even though you meet the requirements of 1 mile clear of clouds, it might not be as safe, it might not be a good idea because you can't see far enough in front of you, sometimes enough to avoid anything or somebody else or something. Let's see, so we have class Golf, 1 mile clear clouds for takeoff and fly into. Class Echo, to fly in class Echo, we need 3 miles, 3152, 3 miles, 1,000 feet above the clouds, 500 feet below, 2,000 horizontal. Class Delta airspace, we need 3 mile visibility and 1,000-foot ceiling for us to take off. And after we take off, we apply the class Echo the Echo airspace. A class E surface area, same thing as a class Delta, 3 mile visibility, 1,000-foot ceiling. And then after we take off, we apply 3152. 10,000 feet, class Echo airspace, that changes. We get called the 5111, 5 mile visibility, 1 mile, 1 mile, and 1,000 and 1 mile in every direction away from the clouds. And the reason why things change is because at anything above 10,000 feet, airplanes, the faster airplanes are flying there. And therefore, they want you to have more time to avoid, in case when you see one, to be able to see them further away so you can give you more time to avoid if you got them, try to avoid, make a turn, left turn, right turn, climb or descend. Any questions? All right. Let's talk about 91-205. And 91-205 and 213 are almost going to go hand in hand there for a minute. 91-205. Let me get there. Talks about, let's see, basically airworthiness and the minimum instrument you have to have on board. And there are many acronyms out there that tell people what they need. A tomato flames, people use that quite a bit. Basically, the idea is to make sure your airplane has the minimum instrument requirement to fly in VFR condition. You don't have to have 2 radios. You don't have to have 1 radio. You don't have to have any radios. You don't have to have a GPS, a VOR to fly. Obviously, it may depend which airspace you're in, okay? For example, you want to land a class Delta airspace, all right? You may need a radio. And believe it or not, you don't even need a radio to land at a class Delta airspace. Well, how am I going to do that? I got to talk to the tower. You make a phone call, tell the tower that I'm going to come in, I'm going to overfly the airport, I'm going to flash my landing lights and rock my wings. Can you give me a green light to land? If the tower says it's okay, you're good to go. Don't need the radio. Follow the procedure you just did, what you told me you're going to do. He gives you a green light, you land. So even in a class Delta, you don't need a radio to land, but prior coordination with the tower is required. So basically you have to, he gave you permission to come through without a radio, okay? But for now, 9125 basically tells you the minimum equipment you have to fly your airplane. And it talks VFR and it talks IFR. And it talks about complex airplane also. So the idea is to pick what applies to you as far as what minimum equipment you want. You need to have. 91213 basically is what we call, let's see, if something goes wrong, inoperative equipment. Okay. Let's say, for example, one of the requirements, I have to have a beacon, or well, not a beacon. I have to have an anti-collision light to fly in the daytime. Okay, that's not working. Well, unfortunately, I cannot go fly that day. I have two radios. Number one radio doesn't work. Well, I don't need two radios to fly. I only need one. Well, what do I do? And I'm keeping things simple. The rule says what you have to do, you the pilot, you have to placard the item that's not working. Enough. So put down radio number one, enough. Little sticky notes, stick it on the radio. The second thing you have to do is you have to deactivate that item. Well, most radios have a circuit breaker. You pull the circuit breaker. And the reason why you do that, you deactivate, is so that you're removing power from the radio in case there was a short circuit. Just turning it off may not do it, because there may be something, a loose wire in the back. And as long as power is coming to the radio, it may cause something else to go wrong. So you deactivate the item. And that way that guarantees that nothing else can go, things cannot get worse, okay? So you placard the item, you deactivate the item, okay? And you enter it in not the maintenance logbook, well, it depends. I mean, not like the ones you have an annual on, but a lot of airplanes have a status logbook, who's flying it, who's not flying it, where you keep, for example, a VOR check and stuff like that. You put it in that logbook saying that the number one radio is op and deactivated. And the reason why you do that is because if it's, for example, let's say you're renting the airplane. Well, John, who's renting it behind you, he can come in, open we'll call the status page of the airplane. Oh, number one radio is not working. He knows that ahead of time. It's not, if he hadn't done anything, he might have gotten the airplane and tried to turn the radio on, and that may cause a short and something else goes wrong. So the idea is for everybody is aware that that particular airplane has something wrong with it, and that way don't try to use it until it's fixed, okay? So now let's go back to that beacon light. Well, basically, the anti-collision light. It doesn't work, guess what? I am grounded. I cannot fly the airplane, but I want to fly it. And there's a mechanic at the next airport that can fix it. He's got a light bulb he can put in for me. Okay, well, the legal way of getting from point A to point B is you call the FAA, the FSDO, and say, hey, I need a ferry permit. I want to go from airport A to airport B, and the reason why is my anti-collision light is not working, and therefore I want to get it fixed so I can go fly. So the FAA will say, okay, have your mechanic call me. They talk, I'll send you a ferry permit, and basically you're allowed, the ferry permit will be very specific what you can do. It will allow you to fly from airport A to airport B, okay? And then get your anti-collision light fixed. Once it's fixed, you're good to go. An example that I use, fuel gauges. You get an airplane and one fuel gauge says 0, one says full. And you look at the gas tank and you look yourself and they're both full. Well, the rule says you have to have a working fuel gauge for each gas tank. And the one that's saying 0 is definitely not working because it's full. Technically, you're grounded. Even though you have 6 hours of fuel on board, hey, it's not working, you're grounded. How can I get it fixed? I get a ferry permit, point A to point B, the mechanic fixes it, then I'm good to go. Now, Something else is, let's talk is about ferry permits. Usually the FAA does that, and they're only open Monday to Friday. And maybe by now you guys know that the FAA sometimes can get very hard to get a hold of. Well, it's Monday afternoon. I need to get my airplane fixed because I've got a flight in 2 days that I want to get, and I need the airplane for it. And I can't get a hold of the FAA. Well, there are examiners, or I'm gonna use the word DAR. Just like we have DPE, designated pilot examiner. What we have is the FAA has what they call a DAR, designated airworthiness representative. Such a person can give you a ferry permit. He represents the FAA? He doesn't work for the FAA. He's like a pilot examiner. He represents the FAA. You can Google him. You can find their names by Googling him, or you might know who it is, or the local mechanic may know who it is. You can call him, say, I need a ferry permit. He'll ask you a bunch of questions, and he'll send you one. Only one difference. He's going to charge you. Okay. The FAA doesn't charge, but usually the DAR will charge you. It's like a pilot examiner giving a practical test. He charges for his services. But the good thing is you can get a hold of him anytime you want to, whereas the FAA, you can't. All right. I think that's as far as we're going to go. Okay, we're past 6:30. If anybody has any questions, let me know. I've got some more I do want to talk about. So what we'll do is the next session, in 2 weeks, we'll finish talking about the FARs, and then we'll may have another subject if anybody has any suggestions that we'll cover.
Good idea.
Okay. Any questions so far?
Just want to say thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I just basically, some of these FARs are so long, it's mind-boggling. But what I did was I gave you the meat, the gritty part of that particular FARs. And by remembering just what I told you, your 99.9% will not do anything wrong in regards to that particular FARs. All right. Any questions? Okay. Well, thank you for joining, everybody. Glad you were here, and I hope you learned something. And
Thank you, Richard.
happy flying.
All right. See you next week or 2 weeks.
2 weeks from now.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.